Again, everything is contextual. You can take one pick and say, wow, this team really blew it with Justin Jefferson. Stipulated. They certainly did. Jalen Reagor looks like he can't play, unfortunately, in the NFL at this stage. Justin Jefferson looks like he's on the way to a Hall of Fame career. But guess what? Black Monday's coming. Guess who's going to get fired? Mike Zimmer's going to get fired. Rick Spielman might get fired. We don't know. We'll see. If the Vikings could trade Justin Jefferson today for the Eagles front office, they would do it.
Welcome back. National Football Show, Dan Sileo, John McMullen. Our very own John McMullen will join us here in a couple of minutes. Want to know what the plan is. I saw John going back and forth with some people on social media, and he was saying that Howie Roseman is a top 5 executive. We'll talk about that, okay? Because I'll tell you what, and I've said this to you guys, I think he's had a hell of a season myself. I mean, hey, look, it's one thing to sit here and be like the national media where you got to try to jam a square peg in a round hole. It's another thing when you have to do this. And I tell you guys this all the time. I'm not a fortune teller. What I do is I see what's going on currently. I don't know, Darius Slay, the Hurts move panned out. You're $50 million this year under the salary cap. Get 3 ones. You got 11 draft choices. Your team made the postseason. You were right on the quarterback. You were right on the coach. I don't know, man. I mean, look, I know it's fashionable to bang on the guy, but I just laid out to you any wet dream for a executive in the NFL. Les Snead, Kevin Demoff, all these guys would love to have a record like that and turning something around. Let's bring John in now and get his thoughts. And John, I just laid it out here for you a little bit when it comes to the year that Howie Roseman has had. I know that you've had a couple back and forths with some people on social media, but I laid it out for you here, man. I got to tell you, Johnny's had and the Darius Slay move. I mean, the whole thing is panned out. That's why you're saying he's top 5, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only that, Dan. It's not about one season. It's about sort of his history as a general manager. And I think, there's 2 different debates here. And one, for people that don't understand the enormity of the job and boil it down to talent evaluation only, don't understand. I mean, to be perfectly honest, So we talk about Jeff Stoutland, who's often lionized around the league and talked about his ability to develop offensive linemen. Well, guess who hired Jeff Stoutland? Guess who kept Jeff Stoutland from going back to Alabama? That's Howie Roseman. That's an instance. You mentioned the salary cap, being able to extend the 2018 draft pick, which all of a sudden looks great. Jordan Mailata, Avonte Maddox, Josh Sweat, players like that. Trades, you mentioned turning that number 6 pick into Devontae Smith and another first-round pick. That's part of it. So, and then look, it's bottom line business. Nobody knows that better than you who played in the league. So what's the bottom line in this league? 4 playoff appearances in 5 years. So 7 teams have done that, right? It's a 32-team league. 7 teams have done that. That's less than 25%. That tells me he's pretty good at his job. Again, everything is contextual. You can take one pick and say, wow, this team really blew it with Justin Jefferson. Stipulated. They certainly did. Jalen Reagor looks like he can't play, unfortunately, in the NFL at this stage. Justin Jefferson looks like he's on the way to a Hall of Fame career. But guess what? Black Monday's coming. Guess who's going to get fired? Mike Zimmer's going to get fired. Rick Spielman might get fired. We don't know. We'll see. If the Vikings could trade Justin Jefferson today for the Eagles front office, they would do it. So if it makes people feel better because they dislike Howie Roseman personally, I'll put it in an easier way for them to take it. The Eagles have one of the best 5 front offices in football.
And this year is definitely showing that out. And like you said, even going back 5 years and how they've laid the blueprint for this thing here, and this could be one of the most important off seasons, and you're retooling it, John. On the fly, one last question, though, on a mentality that Howie has before we get into Saturday's game. Is he more apt, in your opinion? And again, I know you don't have, or maybe you do have some insight into this, but you got 3 1s. You think they're leaning to using those 3 1s, or do you think they're looking to parlay those 3 1s? Maybe, use one of them and then trade back to create 4 1s. You know what I'm saying? Over the next couple of years,
they
have multiple
exactly.
picks.
I'd be very surprised if they took all 3 of those first round picks this year. I expect them to use 2 of them. I would expect them to probably try to spin off, get an extra first round pick in 2023. And then who knows? I often say, Jalen Hurts has I think outperformed what most people have expected at the quarterback position. And I've always thought this is an easier decision for the Eagles than people realize. And their sort of thought process is, if we can do better, we'll do better. If we can't, we won't. And we're happy with Jalen Hurts. But the point by that is, look, if Russell Wilson wakes up tomorrow and says, I want to play in Philadelphia, you got to pull the trigger. If Aaron Rodgers wakes up tomorrow and says, I want to play in Philadelphia, it's not going to happen, but you got to pull the trigger. Deshaun Watson, if he clears up his legal issues, you got to pull the trigger. Other than that, this is not the year to be looking for a quarterback in the draft. There's no law that says a so-called bridge quarterback has to be a bridge for 1 year. It could be 2 years. It could be 3 years. It could be 4 years. You get better when you can get better. If the Eagles can get better, they will. If they can't, they won't.
John, the game plan for Saturday, I'm finding out that I think Dallas is going to try to go like maybe a half or no, and it's like up in the air after that. I kind of find it hard to believe that the Cowboys, and it's hard for them because here's why they're going to be in a position to try to win the game, because they're playing Saturday, John, and some of the other teams are going to be fighting still for positioning when it comes to the playoff picture. So they really don't know, and they still have a shot at being the 2-hole. So for them, I would think that they're going to probably play their players a little bit more than maybe what the Eagles will do. I think the Eagles are in the 7-hole right now. They have a shot at getting to the 5-hole if things play out. If I'm not mistaken, maybe 6. How do you see the Eagles playing this game on Saturday?
Yeah, the Eagles have a chance to go to 6. They can't go any higher than that. So, and it's very unlikely. The Cowboys, as you mentioned, if the stars align, can go all the way up to number 2, but that's very unlikely for them. So both are kind of in the same sort of circumstance. There is seating position, but you don't control your own destiny. In other words, if the Cowboys could get the 2nd seed just by winning this game, well, they're going to play to win the game, but they can't, and they can't control what other teams do. So I think it becomes less important. The Eagles, same thing. And for that reason, I think both teams aren't going to play their starters for a majority of the game. I think Jerry Jones earlier in the week was a little emotional when he said he wanted his guys to play after the poor performance against Arizona. I think they've come to grips with the realization that it's not worth it. And today, within the hour, they announced Trevon Diggs, J-Ron Kearse, Tony Pollard aren't even going to travel with the team to Philadelphia. So they've all been ruled out. They put Tyron Smith, Anthony Brown, Micah Parsons on the COVID list. And remember, they didn't do what the Eagles did. They didn't have these guys test on Monday. So if you fail and you test positive, you can get back for the game. So essentially, more likely than not, they're ruled out. So I think they've kind of come to the realization that it's probably not worth it. And I think both teams, I think you're going to see a lot of Gardner Minshew and Cooper Rush, to be honest.
like a fifth game in the postseason or preseason, right? That's what we're going to kind of
Yeah,
see
well,
here
it's a little bit different because the difference is, Dan, you don't have 80 or 90 guys. So some guys got to play. Some guys got to play.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw some numbers at you here, John, on Jalen here. And it's funny. I could get Chris Sims on or Jimmy Johnson, or I can get on Ross Tucker or whomever. And there's such a wide swing in how people look at Jalen Hurts. He's 28th in passing yards. He's 26th in completion percentage. He won 9 games. He's an alternate to the Pro Bowl. He's made it to the postseason with his team in his first year starting. His season, how do you see his season? And how do you see it maybe even just rub the crystal ball a little bit after this season with him? What do you think he's done to the front office and how they look at him? Do you think they're sold on him and he's passed the audition?
I think he's passed the audition, and I don't think they're necessarily sold on him, for the next 10 years. We always say nothing lasts forever in this league, certainly. So I think those two things aren't mutually exclusive. So I think he's overachieved, but I do think you have to realize, look, this team shifted gears when they were 2-5, and they shifted gears to protect the quarterback. In other words, they went run heavy. They thought they were putting too much on the plate of Jalen Hurts, and turns out they were. Turns out what they did, put together this very unique offense, certainly in the modern NFL, which is based on sort of the +1 in the running game, based on a great offensive line. I was talking to Connor Orr from Sports Illustrated recently, and I thought he brought up an interesting point because he used the term unique and I used the term unique to describe it. So I was interested, and I asked him, and he said, you can't prepare for this typically as an NFL team because nobody else does it. So you can't, in other words, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you can't justify spending all this time trying to figure out what the Eagles are trying to do because nobody else does it. It's similar to Navy or Georgia Tech at the college level.
That's
so
right.
You got
a triple option.
Yeah. You got 1 week to prepare for it. Yeah. And sometimes, even though you're more talented, you look like you know what trying to defend it because you don't know what's happening, where it's coming from. So it's a little bit of that when it comes to the Eagles. But I tell people to kind of tap the brake for this reason, Dan. You don't scale back the offense if you have Justin Herbert. You don't scale back the offense if you have Joe Burrow. So that to me is the difference. And they scale back the offense. So you also have to be realistic and say, hey, the kid's still improving. He's got a chance to be a really good quarterback in this league. But if you start talking about, never mind the Rodgers and the Bradys and the guys who are already there, but the good young quarterbacks, the Chargers aren't waking up tomorrow and saying, we got to protect Justin Herbert. The Bengals aren't waking up and saying, we got to protect Joe Burrow.
Absolutely. 2 last questions here for you, John. We're always talking about Jalen Hurts being the future or whether or not he is. And, do you give him 2 years, 1 year? Is Sirianni the future here? Do you think he's the future? Do you think he's a guy that they're looking at now and going like this? Because let's take just recent history in the NFL. Matt Nagy won the NFL Coach of the Year award 2 years ago, and now he's most likely going to be fired on Black Monday. Okay, so it can turn on you in 5 seconds. People are looking at one eye now with Kyle Shanahan. Outside of Jimmy Garoppolo starting, it hasn't been a lot of winning in San Francisco. So, the world turns crazy in the NFL. How do you think the Eagles look at Nick Sirianni in his first year?
Well, I think he's had a great first year. I think he's the best rookie head coach in this class. I think he's better than Brandon Staley. Certainly when he come to his introductory press conference still today, a lot of people thought he was the punchline. Now he looks like the future. But hey, we're in Philadelphia, man. Doug Peterson won the Super Bowl, and he's out a couple of years later. So I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be the guy for 10 years because things can turn on you quickly. I said, when Doug won, I said, all right, lifetime dispensation card. Lifetime turned out to be 3 years.
But John, that is a lifetime in the NFL almost nowadays.
Yeah, but and by the way, I still think they shouldn't have fired Doug Peterson, but
Agreed.
that's a separate discussion. I think, but that shows, as Jeffrey Lurie has sort of aged as an NFL owner, and he's owned this team for a quarter century. He was very patient at the beginning. In sort of the second half of his ownership era, he's become much less patient, and he's not as willing to wait through the growing pains, or because sports in the NFL is very cyclical in its nature. No matter how good you are, if you're Bill Belichick, as you saw last year, you're going to have a bad season because you're not going to have the talent and you're not going to have the ability to pull things off. But with the great coaches, and you saw it with Andy Reid here and going to Kansas City, if you stick with them, probably the best example of this is Bill Cowher. They wanted him out of Pittsburgh. Can't win the big one, can't win the big one, can't win the big one, right up until he won the big one and won the Super Bowl. Mike Tomlin's going through a similar thing with the Steelers, but people are very impatient nowadays, and that includes Jeffrey Lurie.
Finally here, MVP of the team this season. Who would you pick?
Well, that's a good question. MVP of the team. Boy, you would almost have to go Jalen Hurts, but
how about Kelsey?
I mean, the offensive line is the strength of the team. And as good as Jason Kelsey is, and he's great, I think he goes to the Hall of Fame. He should go to the Hall of Fame. I think he's their third best offensive lineman right now. I think Lane Johnson is playing at a high level. I think Jordan Mailata is amazingly. I don't know if he can be the MVP playing offensive line. That's the only reason. Darius Slay. I mean, if you ask me who's the best pure football player on the Eagles, I'm going to say Darius Slay or Lane Johnson this year. And that includes, the 3 games Lane missed, but since he's come back, he's been so dominant, it's almost ridiculous. But you don't have the control over the game as a quarterback. So when people talk about MVP, Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp, no, I'm sorry. You got to pick Rodgers, you got to pick Brady, whoever, if you're Hub Arkish, most valuable vaccinated player, whatever, pick Tom Brady. I'm picking Aaron Rodgers.
Way to sneak that in there, John.
Yeah. It's boring. It's boring, but you could go MVP, Aaron Rodgers, Defensive Player of the Year, Aaron Donald, Coach of the Year, Bill Belichick. But people like to change it up, Dan. They like to change
I
it
like
up.
most valuable person to a team. I don't know when you're talking player to me. There's this guy here, the impact of leadership and everything. The people.
Well, leadership.
Who does the guy that people look to when it's 2 minutes left in a football game and things are not going great? Who's that one guy?
That's got to be the quarterback. That's got to be the quarterback.
You're hoping.
One thing about Jalen Hurts.
You think they looked at Carson Wentz with 2 minutes left in a ball game?
No. That's the thing about Jalen Hurts. And this, usually with young quarterbacks, and I'll use Herbert again and Burrow, because to me, they're the 2 best young quarterbacks. And Herbert specifically, he has the talent to play at this level. You can just see it.
Oh, yeah.
But you don't know about the other stuff. You don't know about the leadership, the intangibles. With Jalen Hurts, it's completely the opposite. Like, he's got everything you want as far as people gravitate towards him. He's got this unbelievable work ethic. He's a leader on and off the field. But does he have that top tier talent? Usually it's the opposite with young quarterbacks. And he has all the intangible stuff, and you just have to see if he can develop into the type of passer that could win a 35-30 game.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see what the playoffs bring and how this thing plays out this 2021/2022 season with the Eagles and what they do going forward. John, it's always a privilege to get you on. I know you work your ass off for our network, and thank you so much for finding time for me, brother.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Anytime. Appreciate it, man.
You got it. That is John McMullen. You can catch him at Birds 365 in the morning. Do me a favor, guys. Hit the like button. I want to hit on Eagles and Cowboys. I know for the fans it sucks a little bit. I'll explain how you could turn this bad puppy into a positive instead of it just looking like the 5th exhibition game of the season. We'll do it next. Keep it here on the National Football Show.